Okay, number 5. So I just did this one, and this is the first one I'm having to redo because I got it wrong. I picked C, and plot twist, the answer is not C. So let me tackle it again. This one's very tricky, I think. Let's see. Columnist. George Orwell's book 1984 has exercised much influence on a great number of this newspaper's readers. 1,000 readers were surveyed and asked to name the one book that had the most influence on their lives. The book chosen most often was the Bible. 1984 was second. The answer to which one of the following questions would most help in evaluating the columnist's argument? So we're looking for the argument that the columnist is making. Let's see what it is. They're saying that this book, 1984, had a lot of influence on a great number of the readers, right? And their evidence for that is that that book placed second in the survey that they did. Okay, let's look at our answer options. A, how many books had each person surveyed read? Okay, so if each person surveyed read a lot of books, or if they read only a few books, would that necessarily tell us how much influence it had on them or whether it influenced a great number of people? Not necessarily, right? If someone read, 500 books versus someone only read 4 books, well, if they picked this book as the book that most influenced them, that's what they picked, right? Does it really matter how many books they've read? Not really, right? Because if they picked it as the book that most influenced them, that's what they picked. So A is not the best answer choice here. Let's see. B, how many people chose books other than 1984? Well, let's say, for the Bible, out of the 1,000 votes, let's say 900 people picked the Bible. If 900 people picked the Bible, and then let's say, 21 people picked 1984. And then let's say for the slots that we have left, maybe it's like 19 for one of the books and 20 for the rest of the books, right? So like 20, 20, 20, 20. And these are all other books. So, if we knew how many people chose books other than 1984, and it's most of them, right? If it's 900 plus all of this, basically everyone except 21 people picked other books, then 1984, that doesn't necessarily influence a great number of the readers, right? It only influenced like a tiny, percentage, like 2% of the readers. So how many people chose books other than 1984 is pretty important, right? If it's a really, really large percentage, then, 1984 maybe didn't have a lot of influence on a great number of the readers, versus if not that many people chose books other than 1984, then 1984 did have a great influence on the readers. So B would be a good answer choice here. Last time I did this, the first time I did this, B and C both seemed good to me, and I ended up picking C. So let's look at C. B is the correct answer to this question. So that's our answer. Let's look at C. How many people read the columnist newspaper? So I was thinking, well, if a lot of people read this newspaper, like if it's 1 billion people that are reading this newspaper, they only surveyed 1,000 readers, right? How do they know that a great number of the newspaper's readers were influenced? Well, if you think about statistics, there's nothing to say that, these readers, the 1,000 of them, there's nothing to say that they weren't representative of the greater sample, right? They're not saying that this 1,000, they're not telling us how they were selected. So there's nothing to suggest that they weren't representative of the bigger sample, no matter how big the sample is. So I guess it doesn't matter how many people read the newspaper, because 1,000 is still plenty of people. They're surveying, a good number of people. And so there's nothing to say that that number isn't representative, right? I think you need, and statistically speaking, you only need 30 people in your survey to make it a good sample size as long as you are selecting people randomly. And so, because we don't know how people were selected and we can't assume a certain way or another, how many people read the newspaper isn't super helpful for us, I guess. So we can cross C out. How many books by George Orwell other than 1984 were chosen? Doesn't matter how many other George Orwell books were in the survey or how many other George Orwell books were chosen by people. Not really, right? Because we're only talking about this one George Orwell book. And so all the other George Orwell books out there, that's not really relevant for us to evaluate this specific argument, right? So we can cross out D for that reason. And then let's look at E. How many of those surveyed had actually read the books they chose? Okay, so E made me stop and think for a while. And I think I kind of got creative with my thoughts. But I mean, the Bible has influenced a lot of people that haven't read the Bible, right? So do you need to read a book for it to influence you? Not necessarily, right? Maybe they watched the movie, or maybe they haven't read it, but it's very pervasive in their, culture and environment. And, maybe they learned about it in school, or maybe they heard a lot of people talking about it and it influenced them in another way, right? So you don't necessarily have to read the books that influence you. Maybe those books influence their culture and in turn influence them. So that's why E isn't a great answer. So our answer here would actually be B.